All right, welcome everyone to the public part of our meeting this evening. I'll note that public participation is possible for the open meeting via the Zoom link or call-in phone number. Our school committee meetings are also live streamed on ActonTV's YouTube channel, although public participation is not possible with that option. The links and phone number are found on the posted agenda on the abschools.org calendar. This meeting is also being recorded and will be posted on ActonTV's website at actontv.org. Just to follow up, since most people weren't logged on prior to our executive session, the following members are currently participating via Zoom: Kara Wilson-Cook, Amy Krishnamurthy, sorry, I'm really tired. Amy Krishnamurthy, who hasn't signed back on, I don't think, but I believe she'll be joining us, and Yeben Wang. And in the auditorium with me are Evelyn Abaya-Isa, Adam Klein, Jenny Kremer, John Peterson, Angie So, and we are expecting Diane Baum. What? Nora's not coming back. All right. She's left the building. All right. Per our remote policy, all votes will be done by roll call. I'll call each member's name and they'll state how they vote. Thank you for joining us. All right, good evening, everyone. This has been quite a week. I want to begin by thanking the 200 plus individuals who have taken the time to share their opinions regarding the petition to remove the mascot. I've spent the time since we first requested feedback in nearly constant reflection. This issue is not new to me, as the students first presented to me and the superintendent back in June. We're not going to discuss the mascot tonight as a committee, although I imagine there are a few people who are here to use the public comment period to share their thoughts. As a school committee, we have committed to examining the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion within our district. Our workshop this summer focused on learning skills in order to be able to better listen to each other, to better understand each other's lenses, and to commit to doing the hard work around systemic racism that is all around us. I did not attend the last meeting, but I watched at home and was struck by how different it was from sitting in the room. I wanted to take a moment to remind people that these are difficult conversations, and the people who sit around this table were elected to have those conversations. There are a few of us that have served together for a few years, but there are many others who are new to this process. This is not easy, and it's made even more difficult by the fact that our faces and expressions are hidden behind masks. We have members who are participating remotely, and I can assure you that while I'm thankful that we have this technological advancement, it's not the same as being in the room. It's easy to misinterpret tone or intent when we aren't all together. Part of the hard work is really listening, and in this environment, that is hard. Examining issues that are uncomfortable requires understanding, and recognizing intent versus impact in a remote environment is challenging. I want to remind listeners at home that these are just some of the additional hurdles we face as we listen to each other and to our constituents. I also want to implore the residents of Acton-Boxborough, the students and faculty members, the alumni, and others who have taken an interest in this issue to take the time to listen. The hardest part of this work is listening with an open mind to the differing opinions of others. In our current political environment, we are quick to respond and are easily entrenched in the views we believe to be right. What this discussion has exposed more than anything is that as a community, we have a long way to go in doing the work to better understand each other and our unique experiences. We can have both firm beliefs and the ability to listen and understand someone else's viewpoint. One should not preclude the other. This moment in time provides an incredible opportunity for learning if we are mindful about what we are being asked. We will take up this issue again at our meeting on October 15th, but in the time in between, I would encourage everyone to have a conversation with someone who doesn't share your opinion. Listen to their reasoning. Open your mind to the lens through which they see the issues. There is an abundance of passion in our two towns, and what is apparent above all else is that we care deeply about our community and its members. I hope that we can find some common ground and some understanding. Thank you. All right, so that's probably the most I'm going to talk all night. So I do want to just also note that we will take up the mascot discussion at the October 15th school committee meeting, and that our October 29th school committee meeting, which is already on the agenda, will now be a workshop, and a new school committee meeting will be added on November 5th. We had like a 3-week gap in between because of timing and the number of Thursdays in the month and everything else. So I just wanted everyone to note that. The October 29th meeting is already on your calendar, so please add November 5th. Okay, this is the part of our meeting where we invite public participation. Please use the hand raise feature to participate and not the chat. According to our policy BEDH, members of the public may speak for up to 3 minutes on items not included on this agenda. Comments regarding items that are on the agenda should be made during that part of the meeting. Typically, the committee and administration will not respond to comments during public participation. So if there's anyone that would like to participate, feel free to raise your hand and we can call on you. See anyone? No? Okay.
I do not see anyone.
All right, then I'll pass it over to you, Peter.
I should turn my mic on and not off when I need to talk. So good evening, everyone. Welcome back. I just want to thank you all for your continued support. We've had a few good weeks now. They certainly haven't been without incident with regard to COVID. We've seen a couple of notifications of positive cases go out, one at the high school and one at Miriam. But we're following our process. We're learning each time as we manage these cases. I think, what we want to impress upon people as we've come back is that the reentry, we call it a reentry process for a reason, because we need to continue to learn and test how our processes work when they're under stress. And so, for example, one change that we made just after the incident the other day, we had been sending out the notice to all families originally and then following up with close contacts. We've decided to flip that and send a notification to any possible close contacts first, and then to the general community second, so that when we send the note to the general community, we can bring closure and tell them that all close contacts have already been contacted, because we received some feedback that it felt like that left some things unresolved for a couple of families. So, we're working through each of the cases as they come up. I have to say our nurses have been absolutely amazing in doing that. Dawn has been absolutely amazing doing really the brunt of work with our nurses and Board of Health and the different health department agents. It's a lot of work, and I think I sent you a note a couple of weeks ago where even some of our most veteran administrators have commented that things that they felt like normally in a given year would take 5 minutes are now taking 45 minutes to an hour. So, things are slow, but I will say I've been out to schools a couple of times now, and overwhelmingly when I talk to people, the kids I see are happy. And whether we talk to some remote kids and they're talking about being happy, connecting with teachers and connecting with peers, the same is true for our in-person kids where they're happy to be able to get back in and see people and engage. So that's been a real positive. The first big item, I just wanted to send out a thank you to it's an Acton Celebrates Carol Spinney group. Some of you have seen yard signs around town. It's the Big Bird sign that says "Be Kind." But that group actually donated about 18 signs to us so that we could have 2 for every school in town. So we sent those around to our schools and they're going up. But it's just a really nice way. And I think in all of the climate that we're in, whether it's at the national level with the pandemic and election season, or whether it's at the local level, even discussing the colonials, what a great timely message. Be kind. It's simple, and even if we differ in our opinions on different issues before us, we can certainly rally behind that one simple message of be kind. So thank you to that group. I also wanted to share a note with everyone, and I'm sending this out to the school community tomorrow. It's a note that our guidance, or not our guidance, our counseling staff at the high school and our administration wrote to students. And I just want to read that to you because this is also in response to some of the discussion of the Colonials mascot, but I thought they did a really nice job capturing some important points for everyone to think about. So this is their note. As you may be aware, the school committee is currently accepting comments regarding whether, as a district, we should keep or discontinue our use of the Colonials as the ABRHS mascot. As expected, this conversation is also being carried out by way of social media. People have strong feelings in support of keeping the mascot and in support of discontinuing its use. Many posts that were made over the weekend on Instagram and Facebook were hurtful, disrespectful, and degrading. We would like to remind you that when commenting on social media, and probably commenting anywhere, 1, listen to what is being said. There are both historical facts and town traditions that are being spoken about. We need to listen to one another. 2, be open-minded. Be willing to hear one another and adjust your opinion based on what you learn. 3, remember there is a real person on the other end of your comment. 4, show gratitude and support for your peers. 5, consider the impact of your statements, which may be very different from your intent. And then, they just said, remember that no comments that are being made on social media are considered by the school committee. Any comments, then they provided the email address so that students could make public comment as well, which you will receive in the school committee email. And then the counseling staff, what I really like is they ended up setting up an open session for any students who felt they were impacted by some of the dialogue on social media and wanted to be able to process that with each other and with counselors. So they set up a time, online discussion for students to be able to do that. So thank you to the counseling staff and the high school administration for really thinking about, setting an appropriate tone with our students around what a good discussion can look like. I also am sending out a reminder to families tomorrow around the schedule for the next couple of weeks. We know that, trying to maximize the number of in-person days for our hybrid students means that the schedules get flipped whenever we have either a holiday or a professional development day in the course of a week. So, we sent a text message out at 6 o'clock the night before on Tuesday night saying, hey, by the way, remember tomorrow's a different day. But we're trying to stay ahead of it and make sure we give families kind of a 2-week look ahead as well so they can make those plans. Our digital literacy team is also in the process of creating video tutorial webinars for families to view at their convenience. We thought about scheduling them in person, but with the number of back to school nights happening over the course of the next month, there were almost no nights where we could schedule it. So we actually thought it might be more convenient if they were pre-recorded, and that also allows us the ability to translate them before it actually takes place for our families. So they are in the process of creating those webinars for tech support for families, and they're soliciting family feedback. So we're sending out a questionnaire to families so that our digital literacy team can actually understand the questions people want answered before they create the webinars. And then they'll be creating those and getting them out to families. So there's a link in the newsletter that will go out tomorrow. I also wanted to provide a little update on social emotional learning for students and staff. And Dawn, not to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you want to talk to this a little, because in all honesty, I copied and pasted from what Dawn sent me. No? All right, I get to go ahead. All right, so, we've been talking that we want to prioritize social emotional learning. So, Dawn and I didn't want to let an opportunity to go by to then actually tell you what we're doing, rather than just saying we prioritized it. But from a student perspective, counselors, school psychologists, and social workers, who are the members of our mental health team, have been supporting students and their families as they transition back to school and navigate the new landscape of our academic and social environment, whether enrolled in our hybrid or remote learning program. Even more so than in a typical school year opening, our mental health staff have been in constant contact with students and families who are experiencing high levels of anxiety and stress right now. In the classroom, mental health team members are working closely with teachers and staff to identify appropriate supports for students who are struggling academically and or emotionally, and this includes suggesting lessons or activities to infuse social emotional skills into morning meeting routines, conferring with building staff about evidence-based strategies to use with students who need additional support, and participating in grade or building level problem-solving teams. They are also providing direct service to students around self-advocacy, time management, and organizational skills to help them be successful, as well as helping them structure asynchronous days. Find a quiet workspace at home, manage assignments, and understand Zoom etiquette, so important for our kids. Finally, our mental health team members continue to play a critical role as a partner with outside referral agencies to support families with food insecurity, technology needs, and mental health resources. From a staff perspective, it's all grounded in the knowledge that we can't help others if we're not okay. I always liken it to the airline routine before you take off, when they say, in the event of a cabin pressure failure, the oxygen masks are going to come down, and adults, you need to put them on yourselves first, because if you don't get oxygen, you're no use to the child that you're trying to help either. So we need to think of taking care of our adults and our students. So we kicked off our professional learning day with staff sessions on practical strategies for self and collective care. During those first 11 days before students joined us, building principals worked to establish new routines and rituals for staff connection under the new constraints of distancing and state guidelines prohibiting large gatherings. For example, the high school and junior high staff will likely never be able to meet in one place this year. Building-based mental health staff also shared the staff system of supports that we had developed, and our new peer-to-peer program, where we have about 120 staff already signed up. This peer-to-peer program is for staff members to have supportive colleague who can provide emotional support and create a social connection. Finally, in the next few weeks, we hope to begin educator drop-in sessions where educators connect with each other in a supportive environment and dialogue around the experiences they've had transitioning back to school. We think that having a safe space to talk about critical event and its aftermath can be incredibly therapeutic in and of itself, as it helps participants process their emotions and come to terms with their trauma. Last week, our two school psychology department leaders, Heather Stauck and Susan Root, provided our pre-K through 12 mental health team members with support on the educator drop-in model so that they are ready to support groups of educators who sign up for that. So we're excited to be rolling that out as well. I came to you a couple of weeks ago and I provided you a really exciting update on our food services program, and I think I shared that in 2 weeks ago we had 350 individuals come for food, and that resulted in 3,500 individual meals being sent home in a 2-hour time span. So since that time, we've grown again. Last week, we had 450 individuals and 4,500 meals go out, and last night, we had 5,690 meals that went out from our food services staff to members of our community. So that is 569 people from our community. In addition to that, the FDA has been sending kind of farm to families boxes that contain all sorts of goods. And so we distributed 2 pallets of those boxes in addition to the 590 families that we served. So that is really exciting. The program has grown so quickly that we actually outgrew the little pop-up tent that we were having and the wheel-out refrigerators, like to serve ice cream to kids. So we ended up having to rent a trailer that is a large trailer. I put a picture of it in the note that you received. But that has heat so we can operate in the winter, but it also has ample refrigeration inside to be able to keep food fresh. So we're excited by that. It's one area, you know, we all wish we didn't have the need, but we're so happy that we could grow to continue to support all of the needs of the community. I also put in some pictures, and they're in your memo, and it will go out to families, but if you had been in here earlier today, you would have seen Deb Bookus and all of her curriculum team and Val Gransowitz and her staff putting together hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bags of supplies to go out to our remote families. That is round 2 of supply distribution. One thing that's happened in the pandemic is all supply chains worldwide, I don't know how else to say it, they're a little bit messed up because of the pandemic. So supplies don't always come in when you expect them to. But we had round 2, we have 2 days of distribution happening after school hours, so between 4 and 6 p.m. tonight, and then we have it again tomorrow night for our remote families. We have a drive-through style distribution for all these materials, and it went absolutely fantastic. We had a huge number of our remote staff actually volunteer to come in after hours to be able to do that for our families. So I just want to make sure I send the shout out to them and thank you for all the work they're doing. So congratulations, and that was fantastic. Very, very well organized and done, Deb. So that is it for me. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer anything.
John?
It's been very exciting to see activity in the schools again. And I know that everybody in part feels that there's at least a tiny bit of normalcy in what has been a really abnormal time. And I just wanted to remind everybody that unfortunately, if you've been watching around Massachusetts, we've seen communities tick up. And so places that don't necessarily come to mind as places where you'd expect to have problems, like North Andover, have significant COVID cases. So this is just, my public service announcement that says that, we keep ourselves safe by keeping each other safe, and that everybody should be going out and trying to do their daily things as best they can, but very carefully.
I'll just actually echo that, and it's a good opportunity to just say we did publish our updated health metrics today on our website. We have been doing that every Thursday pretty dutifully. And we have tracking charts that you can actually see the data over time, but then we have a weekly report that you can read. Acton's numbers, we went back into the green this week. We're at 1.5 cases, average daily cases per 100,000 residents. So we're averaging about 1.5 cases a day over the 14-day span per 100,000 residents, so it's definitely smaller in Acton, and that's important to know. And then in Boxborough, they are on a record streak of 0 cases for what feels like an eternity, so congratulations to Boxborough. We're affectionately calling that the Boxborough bubble internally, but that's fantastic. You know, Acton's still doing really, really well, but I will say, if you look at the state charts, you know, there's a number of communities very close to us that are creeping in, and so, you know, I would actually really encourage families to think about, you know, where they're interacting with people and who they're interacting with, because we do not operate in a bubble. We are dependent on not only our community, but the area and region and all of our interactions. So we just want everyone to continue to be thoughtful. But John, I appreciate that comment. But all of that data is on our website. It's up to date as of this morning.
I don't see any other questions, so we'll move on to the next agenda item. Tonight, we are fortunate to have the SEPAC leadership presenting to us. Amanda Bailey, Carrie Weaver, and Abe Gutierrez are here to let us know what they've been up to.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Let me make sure everyone's here. I see Abe. There's Carrie.
Okay, so Amanda,
Carrie, you wanna
I'm
go ahead?
going to share my screen whenever you tell me to. And if you just
Please.
say next slide, I'll go to the next slide.
I'll cover that, guys.
This is it, right?
Yep.
All right.
Carrie, you want to
you're
go
up.
ahead?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Carrie Weaver. I am one of the three chairs, co-chairs for the Acton-Boxborough Special Education Parent Advisory Council. I have 2 children in the district. I have a 3rd grader at Blanchard and a 6th grader who is in an out-of-district placement at Cotting School. And we have some good stuff to share tonight, I guess you could say, considering everything that's going on. But we do want to thank Superintendent Light, Interim Special Ed Director Debbie Dixon, School Committee Chair Tessa McKinley, our liaison Diane Baum, and all members of the Acton-Boxborough School Committee for inviting us to present tonight and for your continued support and dedication to all our children and families in our community.
Hello, my name is Abe Gutierrez. I am a parent recently. We recently moved, I would say, within the last 2 years to the Acton-Boxborough School District. I have a 1st grader at Blanchard and a preschooler at the Carol Huebner Early Education.
My name is Amanda Bailey. I have helped chair the SEPAC since 2014. Carrie's going to talk a little bit tonight about our mission for the new members of the committee, and then we're going to go from there. So thank you for your patience.
So our mission as our Special Ed Parent Advisory Council to ensure understanding, respect, support, and appropriate education of all children in our community. Our mission statement under state law says, advising the district on matters that pertain to the education and safety of students with disabilities and meeting regularly with school officials to participate in the planning, development, and evaluation of the school district's special education programs. We do this collaboratively with the school district and our community.
Advance, please. So basically, the SEPAC is an independently run advisory committee to the school committee under MGL. The program feedback that we gather from families and provide to the district has a direct impact on that column on the right, the policies, procedures, and of course, the budget under your purview as a committee. Abe is going to talk about and introduce the priorities we're going to highlight this evening. Advance.
Hello, so for our actual goals and priorities for the 2020-2021 year, we are aiming to monitor state guidance of families, state guidance and families' experiences regarding the reopening of schools. As we know, these are experiences that affect both parents and children alike. We plan to conduct parent guardian surveys and have at least 2 this year. We also aim to address and remove barriers to SEPAC participation and SEPAC leadership for BIPOC parents and guardians of children with disabilities. This is more to encourage participation and make support known to these particular families. We also want to participate in the search processes for the new special education director, something that we are very happy to be participating in as well. And in community education on basic rights and other topics. As we all know, information is only useful when it is known.
Advance, please. One way we've monitored families' experiences through the pandemic thus far was to publish a feedback form. Starting back in March, we revised this over the summer to incorporate considerations for the fall. To date, we have over 130 responses from caregivers of students with IEPs or 504s, including from their new remote academy. We've shared these responses with the district on an ongoing basis. One critical takeaway for our organization is that a number of people did not know the SEPAC's role and how we represent and support them. We're going to talk more about outreach toward the end tonight, but we're at a critical juncture for families, and we need all the help we can get to spread the word that we're here, including re-adding the SEPAC as a family resource on the district website. Advance, please. Other trends picked up on the need for one-to-one or individualized support for many students to successfully access the remote learning environment. The district's made a priority of drawing down the number of paraprofessionals in favor of hiring certified staff, which is a move that we favor. But we're in a circumstance that's requiring more individualized support than ever. Regression is another key component that we're looking at, as the district will be establishing the need for compensatory services on an individual basis in the coming months. As to what helped, there's an asterisk here on consistent staffing. We always see turnover as students transition from building to building or in and out of programs. This year, teams were blown apart as the district crafted the remote academy, and they necessarily hired numerous new staff members. The staff are under incredible demands as they address the backlog of evaluations, run required team meetings, manage progress reporting and IEP development, participate in planning and educate kids. We're also going to throw compensatory services on top of that. So as we look ahead to the budget and the needs there, we just want to sort of flag that for folks. With all of this change, communication becomes critical. The more transparent, collaborative, proactive communication we have, the more trust we have. The fewer issues we see snowball into concerns and problems. Using what we've learned, we're developing a survey to be published later this month, and Abe is going to introduce those objectives. Advance, please.
All right. And now within the survey objectives, we first goal is to solicit information from the entire parent guardian community to facilitate participation and ensure all children with disabilities are represented through our efforts. We just want to make sure that no family feels like they are on their own. For our second goal, in monitoring family experiences with special education programming to provide feedback and guidance to the district, really to facilitate the interaction and communication between families and the district and make especially the families feel that they are, the district is there to help. We're just there to facilitate that interaction. Our third goal is to follow up on the actual issues previously identified through the surveys, feedback forms, and anecdotal reporting, and just to make sure that our efforts aren't seen as empty gestures for these families.
Advance, please. So on the right, you'll see a key finding from our feedback form. As of July, over 40% of those who responded didn't know who to contact with questions or input about their child's return to school in the fall. So the survey is going to look at communication and engagement, making sure that we've righted that number. Service delivery, making sure that full services are being delivered, even if that delivery looks a little bit flexible. Remote learning experiences, how organization can help, and we'll be adding some demographic questions about race and ethnicity to go beyond our usual questions about school and disability type. Advance, please. As Abe mentioned earlier, one of our ongoing priorities is to address and remove barriers to SEPAC leadership and participation for BIPOC parents or guardians of children with disabilities. Our leadership has been solely white for a very long time, and our meeting participation does not reflect our community with regard to race. In order to address this, we've identified the following starting points. These are all steps we're actively taking or preparing to act upon. With all meetings and workshops moving online, this affords a great opportunity to reach more families and also possibly a new barrier to participation with regard to tech access. Abe's going to speak a little bit about outreach.
And actually expanding the outreach for these families, it's just going to be a way for us to really encourage this participation so that they do feel that there is, make these particular families feel that they are still, they're not that much further isolated, but actually brought into the same fold as all the other families facing the same challenges with their children. With establishing a listening session or an online feedback form, we're able to actually encourage that much more, not just feedback, but maybe new views and concerns possibly that nobody may have known before that are faced by these families, whether it be particular challenges such as a language barrier or anything along those lines as well.
Advance, please. We're going to continue to promote events with no cost or those with scholarships, including pro bono advocacy training and assistance. The Federation for Children with Special Needs has been great about having culturally sensitive and diverse outreach, as well as linguistic support, language support rather. Previously, we've emphasized diversity of disability. We need to widen that lens and bring in speakers and provide resources about the intersection of race and disability and how that impacts families and students and education. I'm going to add to this that we also need to continue to tackle disability stigma and ableism on a large scale. Advance, please. Carrie's going to speak about outreach and family support a bit more and then close us out.
So with outreach and family support, we are, the SEPAC is a member of the joint PTO roundtable that was meeting once a month, I believe. And that's a good way to get us into the community with other parents. And it's a good way to collaborate with all schools and idea share and just make sure our kids are heard as well, which they are. It's a good group. We were invited last year to present to 2 different elementary schools about the continuum of support and basic rights. We hope to have this opportunity again this year. We weren't able to do that last year because of school closure, but we are hoping to do it again. We also reached out this beginning of this year to all special ed coordinators to reintroduce our organization and extend partnership opportunities. We have heard back from 2 of them, and it's an ongoing partnership and conversation. We do communicate with surrounding CPACs regarding workshops, whether it be basic rights or any workshop that's relevant. Mostly local CPACs, we've been working with our Maynard, Concord, Carlisle, Littleton, Lincoln, Sudbury, and pretty much whoever else wants to talk with us. With the pandemic and the school closure, it was necessary to reinstitute our monthly caregiver drop-in support hours. That is done virtually, but last month we had, I guess, 1 person participate, but 1 is better than none, and it's needed because everybody is, stressed out. Share resources and information via our newsletter and Facebook page. We will share anything that is related to disability, special education. If you think it's important, we'll review it and most likely put it in our newsletter or send it out. We're pretty good about trying to, on Facebook, trying to get things out there that's positive. And there's a ton of resources out there, especially now, virtually, that it can get kind of overwhelming. So we try to keep it all in one place, which I think is somewhat helpful to people. And it's easier to find when it's all in one place. And Don has sent us things, Peter has sent us things, Debbie, anybody can send us stuff and we can look at it and share it as needed. So we can, I guess, move forward on that. You can move the slide. I don't know what else to say. These are our meeting dates over the next year. They are typically the night before a school committee meeting, which is good. This is all the information. June 9th is our annual meeting and officer elections. They're open meetings, and subject to open meeting law, so we are there. Everybody is welcome to participate, to come. Now that they're all virtual, it is good because we get a little bit more participation, which is nice. And you can advance the slide. So we want to thank you for having us tonight and sharing. We especially thank you to our interim special ed director, Debbie Dixon, just being constantly open and talking with us, and Superintendent Peter Light for the same reason. I mean, everybody has been great, and the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee for your ongoing collaboration and support during this time. It's been a rough year, and we hope that 2021 is a better year for everybody, for school. So thank you.
Thanks, guys. I will open it up for questions. Ginny?
Thank you so much for being here. At some point, do you anticipate giving us more substantive information regarding family experiences? Yes, okay. Do you have any idea when that will be?
So we're going to be publishing our survey at the end of this month. So to get the initial glimpse of how did the reentry go, what's still missing, where can we still shore up practices, and we're going to get that out October, November. So by the end of this term, we're going to have the initial glimpse, and then in the spring, we want to follow up about the conversations around compensatory. So I would say by December, early December, we would have that for you in a more formal report that we'll submit to you. We're happy to come and present that at any point, but we'll be able to get you that information in December ahead of the budget being finalized.
Great, thank you.
John?
Earlier, Peter mentioned how much longer everything takes in the COVID environment, and I've been particularly concerned about the additional demands on parents. So any information that you could have that talks about the change in parental hours that are required to help address school issues in the comparison of the normal environment to our current world, that would be, I think, helpful in appreciating what's happening in the entirety of the system.
Absolutely. We've been encouraging people to document how much support they are providing their children at home. It's incredible in some circumstances, and even with parents giving up jobs, frankly, to stay home and support their kids, they're still not able to access the online learning. So we're absolutely keeping tabs on that. We're keeping information flowing to families about how to document that and use that with their special education teams to get what their kids need. So that's absolutely on our radar.
So given that it's the first day of Dyslexia Awareness Month, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask where you stand with some of the recommendations that you presented to the district last year. I know obviously things have, had to take a little bit of a backseat given what everything else is going on, but you want to...
It's also Down syndrome, ADHD, depression, disability, employment, spina bifida, and Rett syndrome awareness month. I'll just toss that out there.
Come on, Tessa.
Out to Rett. This came up at our September meeting and it got tacked back in as a priority. Debbie has provided us with an update on the district's work, so I would throw it to her to talk about where the district is with this, or Deb. I will say the SEPAC is concerned that families whose children are to receive Tier 2 or Tier 3 intervention with reading or other specialists are not necessarily going to be notified that their kids are getting additional help. This was one of our recommendations. And this year it's more critical than ever that families have that information. It's also hard to scrutinize right now, frankly, because there have been heroic efforts to get people back into buildings safely. There are going to be inevitable curriculum gaps this year, but there are also questions right now about whether the hybrid elementary students are getting all of the Tier 1 foundations, the phonics-based reading instruction, as written by the Wilson Company for Prevention. That's before we get to those who are flagged for additional help. So it's not overtly stated in our presentation, but it's definitely ongoing.
Thanks. Anyone else have further questions? Thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight, and we will look forward to further information.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Next on the agenda is the very exciting approval of meeting minutes from the September 17th meeting. I know that I had two little teeny tiny things, even though I wasn't here, but as I said to Beth, watching it on TV, actually, it's a lot easier to pay attention sometimes to all the things that are said. On page 2, I just had a question. It says in the middle, a 1-month public comment period was suggested, followed by discussion at the school committee meeting that followed that period. And it lists September 17th, but did you mean for that to be October 15th? Like the meeting that the wording of it made it sound like, oh, sorry, in the middle of page 2, in 5.1.2, it just sounded to me like the date would be the meeting, the next meeting we have, or no? Am I reading it wrong? It just was confusing. Okay. Okay, that's fine. That was one comment, and then on page 4 in the middle, it was talking about reviewed his memo in light of the district's focus on improving efforts to incorporate anti-bias and anti-racism practices. One from the educators group and another from the students group. He and Tessa McKinley felt changing the mascot, but I thought we were talking about the calendar change there and not the mascot part of it. Right in the middle of it where it says, after considering the two petitions, one from the educators group and another from the students group, he and Tessa McKinley felt changing the mascot was something that the school committee should ask the public about. But then it says a first step could be to change the name from Columbus. They just didn't seem like they were related.
Yeah, so I think what happened was because both of those topics came to us in the same evening.
Yep.
We were discussing how to address the mascot situation versus how to address the calendar renaming situation.
Yes.
And that we felt that, or that you and Peter felt that bringing up the mascot situation but not actually having a vote, talking about a future discussion on that, would be a different situation than how we were handling the conversation around the calendar change.
Oh, okay. It makes sense. It was just confusing that it said a first step could be, because a first step of changing the calendar isn't a first step of the mascot. Like I understand.
I guess what the discussion was that at least one small step we could take that night was to change the calendar, change Columbus Day into Indigenous Peoples Day.
So the first step was about incorporating anti-bias and anti-racism aspects into our curriculum, not a first step. Like it just, okay, I understand. I just wanted to clarify. That's fine. We don't have to talk about it longer. When I was reading it, I was like, wait, what? That doesn't make sense. That's fine. Go ahead. So, oh, and there was one more thing that you told me. I thought that you said that was in the other minutes. No? That's this minutes? It was something having the, yes. You gave me, and the building committee update, John added in the middle of 6.2.6, which is on page 7. In the middle of that paragraph, after this will be taken care of and costs will come out of the contingency fund, he added, it was noted that for building on new sites, the large variances occur in the site prep phase with low expectation of significant variance in the building construction phase. And that was part of the discussion, says Beth. So
Move to approve as amended?
Second?
we will do a roll call vote. John?
Yes.
Adam? Evelyn? Diane?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Kira?
Yes.
Yeben?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
And me, yes. All right. That passes unanimously, and now I moved all my papers around, so I don't know where anything is. Okay. So next we have our budget update. So is Dave starting or Peter?
Why don't I start and then you can jump in. So, a couple things in terms of budget update. One, we had a good discussion. I don't want to steal budget sub thunder here, but we had a good discussion at budget sub and then ALG. subsequently, where we talked about concern around the timeline for developing the school budget, because, you know, normally we're actually already soliciting budget requests from principals right now, and, you know, like, kids have been in the building for 5 days, and it just doesn't seem appropriate. And in all honesty, as we look ahead to FY22, we really are still right in the middle of this pandemic. We do not know what school will look like next September, and we certainly don't know whether we have to provide hybrid learning, in-person learning, are we still continuing a remote learning program? We just don't know the status of everything. And so there was talk that there's advantage to delaying the process, and so we brought that to ALG, and the town is right now actively pursuing delaying the Acton town meeting to put it somewhere around or just after the Boxborough town meeting, so mid to late May. So the budget timeline, because of that, we're not providing you a calendar tonight to take a look at. We're waiting to hear a little more. I actually think the Board of Selectmen may be moving on something like that within the next week or two, but I do anticipate soon we'll get a town meeting date for the spring, but it will be significantly later than April 1st, so that's great. That means we'll probably delay our budget process until at least December internally to give us more of a sense of what's coming ahead. That also means that we'll have an opportunity to see what the governor's budget looks like well before we have to do any kind of a budget Saturday workshop. Because in a traditional year, we're getting the governor's budget, you know, really about 3 days before budget Saturday, but it's been pretty stable for a few years, so it wasn't a big deal, but I think this year we need to get a handle on that. So budget timeline, that's going to be delayed. What we did want to do tonight, though, we started talking with budget subcommittee about some possible guidelines for us to use as we develop this budget, because it is going to be, you know, a challenging budget year, I think, on a number of levels, but it would be helpful to really have a sense from the committee around what the priorities you have for us as we develop kind of our initial round of budget. So we have some time. It's not, you know, critically urgent tonight, but we wanted to present them to you. I will put them up on the screen and just kind of read them so you can kind of read and think. Dave, do you have anything to add before I put them up?
Not yet.
I can do the big picture stuff. Anything that has any level of skill requires Dave. All right. I'm confident no one can see that, so we'll see what we can do to. And that didn't do anything. Here we go. So this is only a draft. It's been to budget subcommittee once for a little bit of feedback, but we wanted to bring it to the full committee for feedback before we went too far with anyone. So the first one was develop a flexible budget that is responsive to uncertainty caused by the pandemic and allows for a variety of educational models. In other words, plan for the uncertain that's ahead of us. The second one was assume more uncertainty with regard to state and federal funding for schools. Adequately fund education programs designed to expedite recovery from the pandemic and ensure effective services and supports are in place for all students' social, emotional, and academic needs. So when we're thinking about what's most important to us, we need to be thinking about how are we helping students recover from the pandemic, educationally, socially, and emotionally, and make sure we're putting our priorities there. The next one was evaluate opportunities to use existing resources to align services and supports across the district in a fiscally sustainable manner that balances students' needs with the economic interests of the community. So if there's, you know, challenges around resources, we need to really think carefully about how we can align the resources that we have in a way that best supports students. Considering funding directly allocated to programs that support students with IEPs, English learners, students whose families may be income insecure, students of color, or other groups who may have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic and school closures. So we need to really think about who was most impacted by these closures and make sure that we're allocating resources directly to programs that support those students. Prioritize our anti-bias, anti-racist strategic initiatives. Evaluate kindergarten enrollment projections carefully in light of fluctuations in kindergarten enrollment due to the pandemic. We know statewide kindergarten enrollment has seen huge fluctuations this year, and almost universally a significant drop in all districts with regard to kindergarten enrollment. We don't know what that means for next year. We don't know whether that means some people chose to homeschool in kindergarten, may choose to skip kindergarten because it's actually not required, and just enroll right in grade 1, or whether they're hoping to delay kindergarten by a year, and we may have a huge incoming kindergarten class. There's just a lot of uncertainty that we need to wrap our heads around in the budget projections. Evaluate all-day kindergarten tuition in light of assumed resumption of all-day kindergarten during FY22. So, you know, if we had to make an assumption today, we would assume we're going back to all-day K. Remember, we're half-day K universally this year because of the pandemic. But we would assume we're going back to an all-day K model. We need to decide what we're doing with kindergarten tuition in that. We want to maximize opportunities to leverage alternative revenue sources, including but not limited to state and federal grants. So what state, federal grants, other grants can we look for as a district to try and offset some of our costs? Monitor strategic use of reserves in light of economic uncertainty. You know, we want to think carefully about where we have reserves built up. We still have very healthy reserves, even though E&D balance has dipped slightly this year below the target. But if we have uncertain economic times, we need to think strategically about what we're doing. Evaluate strategies to replenish revolving accounts that have been negatively impacted by the pandemic-related costs and reduced revenues. So we've talked to you about the all-day K account. We've talked to you about the athletic account. We've talked to you about food services accounts. These accounts all have had significant reductions in the last year, and they're going to need some thought to start to rebuild those as we move forward. And then finally, resume funding of the capital improvement plan in order to fully implement planned improvements. So we've been thinking about this for a while, and we need to think about what that looks like as we move forward, because we did pause some projects this year. So that's what we came up with. It's kind of a long list, but you know, we wanted to try and capture the general idea of what we thought we might be planning for. So I'm happy to take any comments now, or if there's another process, sending them to Beth, then we can bring them to budget sub.
Adam?
I just want to provide a little additional color and thanks to some of the members of the subcommittee who, when we originally reviewed this, provided some good feedback. The first is the third to last and second to last bullet around reserves and revolving accounts. We, at the suggestion of John, we actually separated those two. They were originally one bullet point, and I think it was important because it identifies the fact that we're seeing that the revolving accounts do need to be actively replenished versus the fact that our reserve accounts are something that are here for this very purpose. So I just wanted to provide some additional sort of color around that maybe the reserves are something that we'll have to look at this year, and we may be coming back underneath some of our policy targets for the reserve accounts. And then the second thing I wanted to mention was in the fifth bullet down, you know, we're fairly specific in the programs and the groups of students who we're looking to make sure that we fund directly to those programs. And so I would say that while we wanted to make sure that every program had adequate funding, there were definitely specific subgroups of students who we wanted to call out specifically in these guidelines to make sure that they were considered for that funding. That was it.
Just to comment on that last one, you know, it's interesting because we had that discussion in budget sub about whether you just list like students who may have been disproportionately impacted, but Don and I and Deb had done some work with the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium last year around kind of our district strategy and looking for feedback from them. And one very strong piece of feedback they gave us was, if you're really looking to impact people, spell out who you want to impact and make sure it's really clear. Otherwise, you probably won't do it. So we're open to feedback on that, and we'd like to hear more, but that was the intent of it.
Does that say that Yebin's raising his hand at the very top there? Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Tessa. So just out of curiosity, what does this mean? Prioritize anti-bias, anti-racist strategic initiative. What does this mean, and over what?
So one thing that we had done, we had a draft strategy that we had sent to them, if you remember last year with the school committee. Yebin, I don't think you were on quite yet, but we had our strategy in draft format, and we were looking to have the school committee adopt that in the spring And then, we have a tagline now, just cause COVID, meaning, we shut down and things took a bit of a turn. But we want to come back to that district strategy. And one of the really overarching objectives was around anti-bias and anti-racist work in the district, in our big picture strategy. And we feel like we've made some inroads in that, and we're starting some work there this year, but we need to make sure we continue to prioritize that work moving forward. And if it's over what, I don't think it's a question of over what. I think it's saying make sure you keep this front and center and don't lose track of it.
Okay, thank you.
Evelyn? Oh, Jenny Etter's up first. Sorry, I only saw, I don't care which one of you goes first. You pick.
Okay, thank you. Going back to the one before, I'm sorry if this is a stupid question, but what does funding directly mean?
Well, meaning if we have programs, like we need to really think about our special education programs. We need to think carefully about our English learners and what are those students' needs going to be as we return. Similarly, students who might be income insecure. What programs do we have in our district that might need additional funding to make sure that they're supporting the populations of students they're serving?
Okay.
So it may not be, maybe there's a different wording for it, but the intent is make sure we're really thinking carefully about groups that might be disproportionately impacted, and then think of programming that they may need, whether it exists or not, and then fund it.
Okay.
So back to that comment about the line about prioritize anti-bias initiatives and racist strategic initiatives. Similarly, should we be listing out what we want to prioritize so that we don't overlook them?
Yeah, so I think that's a great point. One of the things that we will do as we get a little bit more into the year is bring that draft strategy to you, and we want to actually discuss it with you, and we actually want to finalize that because we need to move it forward formally. We have been moving items within it forward regardless of whether or not it was voted formally, because we had already done a significant amount of work to gain consensus around it. So we want to bring that for one last round of feedback and then move it forward, but until we do that, I don't know if I would quite list them yet.
Got it.
So to clarify, though, for people who weren't on the committee, like you, last year, this was supposed to be brought forward like that. I mean, this was part of Peter's goals last year and was an overarching district strategy needed to be written. And so all of this, some of this is coming out of that, which some people here may not have seen yet, right?
I'll send, you know what, I'll send the draft out to everyone so you see it and have the,
It'll give you
have
more,
the most
it'll give you,
current version.
it'll give you more context, I think, for what he was talking about. Sorry, I didn't mean, Evelyn, did you have another question? I didn't mean to cut you off.
I had a question for Adam or Dave about replenishing the revolving accounts. Are there benchmarks for that, or is how do you think about replenishing? Not how, but what's an appropriate? Are there models for that, or is it just whatever you can do?
I think it varies from district to district and program to program, and community ed's a different animal from the lunch program, et cetera. I think the benchmark is where were we? So we can, as a matter of fact, I looked today at a tear came to my eye and looked at the revolving fund balances as of the end of February, and things were looking good. We lost upwards of $500,000 each in community ed and the tuition revolving fund and the school lunch fund. That restoring to that level is not going to happen in 1 year. I talked to Kirsten today about her program. She's doing fantastic, as Peter said earlier. The numbers are probably indicative of not losing any further ground this year, but we're not going to make up $500,000. We've established, I think, a new benchmark in that we've bottomed out And unless some things happen, and I do want to get 1 minute to just talk about that, we're where we are, and the trend line has made a quantum shift.
Yeah, I want to respond to Dave's comment about the reference point of where we were historically, because I don't think the reference point was necessarily established through a deliberate process of looking at the volatility that was associated with the particular operation, and then making a conscious decision about where the reserve should be in order to provide the right level of buffer. And there's always a tension, because on the one hand, each operating entity loves having a big reserve. On the other hand, that reserve only exists by moving money from taxpayers into that reserve. And so the goal, of course, is to have a reserve so that there isn't volatility that leads to bad operational decision-making, but not to have so much money that we've excessively taxed the community. And that's always a hard thing to figure out what the right level is. And it depends a lot on the volatility in your operations. And of course, right now, Dave is sitting there saying, we have maximum volatility. We just don't know what's going on. So it's a really complicated discussion, but I just wouldn't accept the idea that the reference point should be where we used to be.
Can I just add a couple of, so I think my answer was the technical one, and John's was more the political one. You saw in the goal, the recommendations, the guidelines, the major theme is uncertainty. And even though that word isn't listed, the one about leveraging alternative revenue sources, including but not limited to grants, two things. Number one, this is hot off the press. I got it today. I don't know if anybody else got it yesterday. The memo was dated September 30th. But the state has announced round 2 of the CARES Act Relief Fund program, which essentially means that Acton and Boxborough will be able to apply for the remaining amount of their allocation. I think the first round was more or less about half of their allocation. They'll be able to apply for the remainder. And the second piece is just the coming attractions notice. My team is working on a comprehensive report of the of all the grants and their status as the applications have been and continue to be submitted. We did receive today our first revenue from FEMA. It's quite surprising. They usually take significantly longer to liquidate grant requests, but we received $55,000 today, which was a reimbursement of FY20 costs, which are gone but not forgotten. So this will be a revenue for FY21. Thank you.
Are there? Yep. Yemen.
Thank you, Tessa. So, just for learning purpose, right? What is a major goal of our budget? Is it, say, to survive through the hard time, or is it to maintain zero deficit, or just to get a need-based budget policy? I mean, what is the key strategy of our budget for the next year?
So I think that's actually the committee's decision in terms of giving us. I would say, I don't think there's any one strategy that we can adopt that's going to be successful. I mean, I think if we're only planning for uncertainty, then we're leaving out a forward-looking lens to think about what our students need as they come back. I was an educator first and I was a teacher first. I would hope to think that our highest priority is going to be the needs of our students, but we're doing it in a uncertain fiscal environment that we need to be mindful of. I guess that's how I would maybe summarize it. So actually, that's a great question, but that would be my goal.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Diane, go ahead.
this is not going to be a popular thing to say, but I'm looking at, I think it's bullets 3 and 5. And these are of course things that we should do, but you know, FY22, I guess the word uncertainty is paramount here, because to say we're going to, you know, fund programs suggests to me that we have the money to do so. And it does say evaluate and consider, you know, and those are fine. And these are populations that can't be ignored. And that's a really poor choice of words, but you know, their needs are significant in a COVID environment. I just don't want to propose budget guidelines that are unrealistic, really. Maybe if you collapse one of those or both of those with the one in the middle that says, you know, you really use existing resources to align services and supports. I just would like to kind of consider injecting realism into this, given that we're in FY22 and looking at a potential tax increase anyway, just because of the building debt. So I'm just going to throw that out there.
To me, this says that we prioritize that above other educational programming, that's like the top of our list. Like, for instance, if we're looking at a, you know, tiered list of things that need to go, if we need to reduce by 500,000 or whatever, this says to me, these are our top priorities that we wouldn't touch, rather than being unrealistic. But that's just my 2 cents. Adam?
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from, Diane, and I think we definitely want to continue to be sensitive to the challenges that the towns are up against. I think, though, that it's important for us to be as explicit as possible. Just like Peter mentioned, you know, when we talked about directly funding those programs, if we don't call out what are the most important things where we want to put our effort first, then we don't have a lot of direction, and we're not giving a lot of direction to the administration in terms of how to build that budget. So I think for me, the first 2 points really speak to what you're talking about, which is it's going to be an uncertain time. We have to be flexible, but even in our flexibility, these are the things that are most important. And beyond that, you know, I think even in some of the conversations that I've had, I don't necessarily want to see us abandon every other initiative that we're looking at, but we want to be able to maybe build a budget that considers that we don't know what we're going to have available to us for funding, and these things have to be at the top of the list, but we would expect there to be a fairly comprehensive list of all of the initiatives that want to be funded. And as we get more clarity in what the financial picture looks like for next year, we can then sort of add and replace those items. Maybe we have to plan for the cost of another remote learning program for next year, and we may not find out until later on in the year that we don't need that. So I think it's important that we say these are the things, regardless of what our rest of our financial picture looks like, that we need to have in place. And then beyond that, we want to make sure that there are items that are lined up should the picture improve, or in some cases, you know, not improve. So to me, that's where I see the comment around flexibility and uncertainty at the beginning of the guidelines, and then calling out very specifically what is important to address first.
Yeah.
So in terms of process, are we still going to have a budget Saturday? When do you think that might be? Is the process going to look the same as just delayed, or is it just really, you don't know yet?
So I guess, you know, that's something we're hoping to hear from Town of Acton relatively soon about, like, the end date, and then we obviously have some big things we need to build backwards from that. Our intent was still to go forward with some format of a budget Saturday. You know, it will probably look different because it probably won't be all in one place. We have to think about what that looks like, because a 6.5-hour Zoom meeting might be excessive. I don't know if you believe me on that, but you know, so we got to think about the format. But yeah, we'll do some kind of budget workshop. You know, I think we're going to need a little bit more time up front with the administrative team in really thinking through all the nuances of this and what we're seeing currently and thinking forward. So, you know, I would hope we're not targeting, you know, December again for kind of a first look at the budget like we typically do. My hope would be somewhere like mid-January. So it's really more of a shift of the overall timeline than anything. But Dave, any more thoughts on that?
No, but just as an overall comment, and this may go back to Diane's previous question, the first 4 words out of the box are develop a flexible budget. So if you keep that in mind, everything else kind of flows from that. And what it's going to look like, as Peter said before, we need some time to hope to get a handle on just getting some clarification on what it might look like.
Jenny?
I just wanted to add very quickly that with respect to bullets 3 and 5, I think from a budgetary standpoint, we need to understand that delaying meeting those needs is likely to increase the expense of meeting those needs down the road. So it really is fiscally prudent to deal with them as soon as we can, as soon as we know about them.
I wanted to say a couple things about the schedule. As a practical matter, one of the things that's always been problematic for the school committee is the fact that the Acton town meeting the first week of April drives the schedule for the budget, and it just backs up from that. And that's not helpful relative to the state process. So from the longer term perspective of the school committee, it would be my view that we should advocate that Acton consider on a permanent basis moving town meeting to be more aligned with Boxborough, because one town is going to be first and one town is going to be second, and whichever one is first is going to drive our budget process. And then the second thing I wanted to say is, for people who are trying to figure out what the calendar looks like to move from the first week of April to mid-ish of May, means that we would move everything by about 6 weeks, which would take that, you know, beginning of December thing, move that cleanly into January after the governor's budget, and then everything else would flow out from that. So that's a very doable calendar. And then I guess the last thing is, in looking at the meeting, one of the considerations on the Board of Selectmen side was being able to, you know, have the indoor-outdoor kind of venue again. That's, you know, the farther they push it, the more compatible with reality that becomes. So, you know, I wouldn't actually be surprised if in the end Acton Town Meeting winds up after Boxborough and even into early June.
I'll just add, based on what Jenny said, I mean, after listening to Amanda's report, just by the necessity of not having enough days to educate kids, we could be facing an enormous gap in knowledge next year, not just with the kids who already have identified learning needs, but others who aren't getting the foundational support that they would have needed this year, not because we're not trying to do everything that we can, but, you know, they're only in school 2 days a week. So, and the kids who are, you know, remote, or we all know it's not the ideal format. So that's how I think about some of that stuff. All right, are we done with budget? Yes?
For the moment.
For the moment. Okay, right. So that brings us to subcommittee and member reports. Policy, so Diane?
Yeah, so policy met, and we're bringing forward 2 policies to you. The first one is file BDE, subcommittees of the school committee. This is a first read tonight. We took this right off of the National School Board Association, the NEPN index, and just, you know, bringing forward for your consideration. I had 2 questions come to me already. One was from Adam, what is the intention of the clause in number 2? The committee chairperson, subject to the approval by the committee, will appoint the subcommittee's chairperson and its members. So what does that clause mean, subject to approval by the committee? Is this a vote? What specific actions might we take? And then John emailed and asked about maybe producing some procedures around timing and, you know, how we solicit the interests of the group. Rather than leaving this to oral tradition. So I'll just tell you just briefly that the reason for bringing this forward is just to codify practices we already have, and not really necessarily to introduce something new where there's just nothing on the books about how subcommittees are formed. So it's just kind of I thought it would be a good idea to have something in our policy manual that reflects what we actually do. I'm looking for feedback on this clause in number 2 and trying to get a consensus of the committee about if you want to leave that in or not, or clarify it or not, and how you feel about adding procedures that are more specific than this into the policy or having a separate procedure. So I'm happy to take any comments now, or you can also email me. We are meeting on Wednesday, so you can email, if you could email me before that time, that would be wonderful.
I was confused by the wording in number 2 too, because my understanding just of how we do it now, if that's what we were doing, was codifying what we do now, is that it's the chairperson, at the discretion of the chairperson. Certainly, the chairperson asks for, intention and feedback and, interest, but basically it's at the discretion of the chairperson and not subject to approval by the committee. So I don't know if that was just a wording choice or changing something.
So when I made the suggestion that I thought maybe this would be helpful if we had a procedure associated with it, I was thinking about all the work that Amy did on the school committee reorganization meeting, where there's lots of sort of tweaky little details that if you look at the procedure, then you can go back to the policy and say, oh yeah, this procedure is compatible with that, and now I understand what you really mean. And that's why I think a procedure would be helpful and help in looking at stuff like this and saying, oh yeah, if this is the procedure that exemplifies the policy, then either, yeah, we're good for that, or we need to change something.
I feel like I'm going to channel John here and say, why would we need more description of what we need to do when we've not had any in the past, and we could probably very clearly inside the policy just state how it works?
Are you saying let it be noted that John wants excessive rules?
Yes.
I will go on record as saying that as far as putting in dates and timelines and everything, John, I certainly am glad that we did not have those this year, because I think it is something that complicates flexibility when you don't know what's in front of you. I was entirely grateful that we didn't have something like that. I mean, I think that, when Diane and I transferred power from her to me, initially, we had that discussion of changing it to not like the meeting after we decide, which was incredibly helpful, I mean, in lots of ways. So, having that as a date of moving forward, but I think that, I don't know, codifying some other timeline really sort of, I don't know, makes it very difficult for the person who's chair to prioritize doing some of those things. So I think I would be against putting something specific in like that, or adding procedures. I don't know if that's what you were trying to say too, Adam, but like, I don't know that it's very hard. There are so many procedures around everything, and making decisions about who should serve on a committee or a subcommittee or whatever. I think defining what a subcommittee is like the most important part of it, and what isn't a subcommittee, what needs a chairperson and what doesn't. To me, those seem like the most important parts of what should be there for future committees. Yeah.
So since I'll happily argue both sides of any question, I'll join myself on the side of Adam and say that, if we can make sure that the policy is clear, so that whoever the chair is will feel comfortable, even if they have to pick it up without a lot of history and say, oh yeah, I understand what is within the scope of what I can do, and now I, as Tessa just said, can flexibly implement it, that's fine with me.
I don't want to beat this one to death. I just have two more comments. The first is, my questions around item number 2 were really a question for the committee as a whole. How I read this policy is sort of different than we've been operating in the past, and so I think it would be important for committee members to sort of chime in about how they feel the process of assignments on subcommittees works. And personally, what I will say is that I believe that the method we've been using up to this date seems to work really well, because I think there's a lot of collaboration that happens between the chair and the administration that probably informs those decisions that probably is not something that we need to hash out here in an open session and in front of the whole committee. And then the second thing that I just thought of that would be helpful as we actually get to my next section on the budget subcommittee is maybe some language in here talking about we talk a little bit about the subcommittee will provide with a list of functions and duties, and I think putting a little bit more color into that area to talk about what is it that, you know, how often do we review those? Are those guidelines something that are voted on and approved by the committee as a whole? I think that there's probably a little bit more guidance that we can give to ourselves when we establish and review our subcommittees.
Great, thank you. We'll bring that back to the committee. The second policy, we're asking for your consideration to suspend file IKB, which is our homework policy. And you'll see in the form that we use to preface the substantive items in the packet, just to let us know if what action is required of us. There's actual wording around what the language would be for IKB, what it would look like if we suspend this policy. The reason why this has been proposed is because the long weekend for K through 12 section states that homework will not be assigned over long weekends, including those due to religious holidays and those marked by a district-wide closing. When there is no school on Monday, in-class assessments will not be scheduled earlier than the following Wednesday. And this, in an environment where we're remote and hybrid, this creates a period of 5 or 6 days, one of them coming up in October, where there will be a prohibition against any kind of assignments of homework. And it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because it reduces continuity and time on learning for students unnecessarily who already have disruptions in their schedules. I don't know, Deb, if you want to speak more to this policy and why we're asking for a suspension.
Yep, so just for some more specifics around it. So for example, if a student was in the cohort where they only met with their teachers on Monday and Thursday, right now I think this week in particular we didn't have school on Monday, so Wednesday then became an instructional day. We have that for the next couple of weeks, and so there would be many weeks in a row where a student would not be with a teacher from Thursday to the following Wednesday. And so that creates a long period of time. And so for a teacher not to be able to assign some kind of work for that continuity would really prevent sort of what we feel that flow of work and learning happening. So we're asking for this to be suspended so that our teachers can use their best professional judgment while of course keeping in mind the intent of our homework policy to begin with, and that is to make sure that we're keeping our students' social, emotional, and well-being at the forefront of the work that we do with them.
It seems clear that this reads very badly in the current environment, so I have no concerns about suspending the policy. But obviously, you know, both from the perspective of a school committee member, a parent, and a student, understanding homework expectations, you know, is still very important. So if this goes away, how will we recalibrate everybody, students, families, and the school committee as to what homework expectations should be?
There are two parts to our policy, and one was the quality and one was the quantity. When we talked to the subcommittee, one of the things we did discuss asynchronous assignments and homework. You know, there's a bit of a blurring between the two right now. And truly, an asynchronous assignment, in the end, you know, our hope is that the homework that is assigned to students later will become much more like an asynchronous assignment with all those different kinds of components, so it's much more engaging for students. And so the quality is something that we hope to, again, in this type of environment, continue to improve upon. The quantity piece, I think, is, again, we just need to be very mindful that our students, again, all the different things that we talked about at the beginning of the year, the trauma, the stress that our students are under, families are under, and just being very mindful about that, especially if students are participating in a family event or over the holiday, or if it's a religious holiday that they're celebrating. So for both of those pieces, that's the intent of the homework policy was to balance those two things And that's what we'll have to be mindful of going forward.
Okay. I think Kara raised her hand first, and then Angie.
So given what we just said about, that we're trying to keep this trauma sensitive, that we're still trying to keep the social emotional learning at the forefront, is there a way to, instead of just straight up suspending this, either A, bake those things in, or B, just put in a temporary new policy that, that says all of those things? There's something about this that doesn't feel right, that we're saying, we understand that this is a different space, and yet for some reason we're going to add homework to long weekends, though we understand we're enduring through the trauma. So I don't know how these rules work with policy, but I just wonder if it would be better to add something new or to bake something in rather than completely take this off.
So Kira, that's a very good question, and it's one that we talked about in the subcommittee, and that is why in the summary of topic section in the packet is a statement that goes on record, and it wouldn't be policy, but it would be a statement that goes on record that says, given the nature of this school year and the different learning modes, it is recommended that we suspend the policy with various schedules, work to be completed at home may be assigned over long weekends or holiday weekends, assessments may be assigned after long weekends. And then the next paragraph, and I think I'm just going to read it just so that it's public in the best way that it can be. The intent is to preserve the continuity of student learning while being mindful of the need for social emotional wellness and balance for our students' lives. Educators and building leaders welcome student voice and family feedback as we continue to strive for a healthy balance. This suspension would be in effect until the district returns to a full in-person mode of teaching. So that's what we were recommending, and thank you to Deb for crafting that statement, which really does capture the essence of what the intention is as we are learning in asynchronous ways on a regular basis. So that really does inform the frequency piece, we thought, of the policy. It's really just left to teacher discretion at this point, but the principles guiding that are embedded in the statement that's in the summary of topic.
Diane, if I can just add to that a little bit. Kira, Diane and I actually started the conversation with this probably a couple weeks ago. And we started with the idea of maybe do we want to modify it, or do we want to just remove certain language but keep other language? But one thing we came back to was the homework policy at AB has historically been a challenge, and we have lots and lots of diverse views on what homework should be. And so, I think it was like a year and a half to develop the first homework policy. And since we developed it, we've been talking about what modifications might we want to do with it for the last 2 years. My fear is if we try and change or add some language, we would probably be through a lot of this school year by the time we agreed on what the language should be. And I actually don't say that lightly. I'm saying it, a little bit in jest, but with an air of seriousness too. I think, I was at the high school today, and I was talking with some of our counselors, and their feedback was the kids have been really positive about the amount of homework they've been receiving this year, that it felt appropriate to them. It wasn't that there was no homework, it wasn't that they were getting, overwhelming amounts, but it felt appropriate to the times. And I think, I actually think our teachers have really recognized the social emotional needs of students. And I think at this point, I really trust their professional judgment on this one, especially with some guidance from us as administration that says, look, the policy is being suspended because we know that the strict guidelines in it just don't work in the pandemic, because there were too many in this scenario with cohort gold or cohort blue, or the remote learning program couldn't log on a day or something like that, that there's just too many unknowns. But I think if we can give them, we want the intent of it there, but we need to provide you with a level of flexibility to be able to keep the academic work going as well. I do think our educators have really embraced the idea that the social emotional needs of kids are first. And I think our administrators would love to be able to kind of empower teachers to work within that, but then have conversations if it somehow goes awry.
Angie?
Yeah, thank you for Peter for the clarification. So I understand the reason why we're looking at to suspend. My concern is because we're in this pandemic situation, so if we suspend, then what does that mean? Do they have no homework, or what policy should the teachers or the staff be following?
So no, essentially what we're saying, the policy has really rigid guidelines about when you can and cannot assign homework. So you can't give an assessment within 2 days after a long weekend. Teachers can't, if we hold to that right now under the current policy, teachers aren't going to be able to give those assessments, and we need to be able to allow them to give the assessments when they need to. So it's actually providing the teacher more flexibility to just have continuity of instruction, as opposed to, it doesn't remove homework or it doesn't add homework by nature, it just pauses it for a year.
Yeah. So, okay, so that's kind of confused, because the way I look at homework is a way, actually, especially in this pandemic situation. Earlier, Tessa mentioned about that we're concerned about the gap after the pandemic, that the situation is, for the next year among the students. And the way I look at the homework is that the homework is actually training the student to work independently, be able to take responsibility, and they can learn their time management, and there's a lot of positive things. And without a policy in place, I kind of feel that there's no guidelines for the staff. And some of the teachers gonna do a lot, and some of the teacher may not. It doesn't have a guideline to it, so it will create inconsistency among the student. Depends on which class they're going to and the teacher they get. So that's the kind of the outcome that I'm really concerned about. And if we suspend this, and the other thing, kind of suspend is kind of sending a message that we don't expect you to do homework, something like that. It's like, so how do we manage be able to kind of create a consistent? We are expecting you to do homework, and we want to look at the homework as a positive thing in your learning process. And how do we be able to keep that gap minimum for the next year with this?
Sure, I think that's a good question. I think the challenge is, the reason we want to suspend this is the current homework policy is keeping teachers from assigning homework. And because there's long weekends and there's holidays and things like that, and they just can't even assign the homework right now. And they can't assess their students because there's too many days in between cohorts and holidays and things like that. So if we keep the policy, we're actually restricting significantly the amount of homework teachers can give. We're actually trying to give them more freedom to have more consistency of homework.
There's other people that have questions. We're gonna keep moving. Adam, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, thank you. I first want to respond to what Angie said. We have a very unique opportunity now in that we don't need to assign homework because every other day our students are actually responsible for learning remotely in their asynchronous time. And I think that that's probably a very clear example of how they can manage their time and continue to learn without the direct instruction of the teachers. And I would say from my own experience that's actually proven to be more beneficial in some cases for at least some, my students, my kids, to have to learn on their own in an asynchronous method. So that's my first comment. My second comment is, had this been 2 years ago, I would have been a little concerned about suspending this policy. It was a fairly controversial topic back in 2017 when it was voted in. But I think that where we are today with what Yeah, I just think that this idea of how homework is handled in the district is far more internalized by our staff, that I have no concerns about removing it. I think that it's the right thing to do. I think that the paragraph that leads into the justification really speaks to why it's important to do this now. I had originally thought, well, why don't we just remove the one clause? Why don't we suspend the one clause around long weekends? But I don't think that, you know, to Peter's point, I don't think that gives the teachers the leverage and the administration and each individual class the sort of the freedom they need to do to create sort of new programs and new methods in this unique time. And my last comment is really a question. When we look at the policy on suspending policies, it states we have to review this at the next scheduled meeting. And my question is, if we state in our motion to suspend this policy a specific date or time, does that then negate the need to discuss this again at our next meeting?
It seems like it would be silly to discuss it at our next meeting because we would only be suspending it for like 2 weeks, right? John?
That one is asked and answered because I asked that and Ginny responded to that previously. So I think on that basis, I will make a motion that we suspend homework policy IKB until school fully reopens.
Second. And can I just say that this does require a 2/3 vote tonight?
A 2/3 weighted vote, right? Okay. Is it? All right. So we will do a roll call vote. Unless, sorry, you have another question? No, she asked if I seconded. Oh, sorry. Amanda has, before we vote, Amanda in the audience has a question.
Apologize for interrupting your vote. So I just want to point out that this is not just quality and quantity, this is also individuality. There is a line in the homework policy about students with IEPs and disabilities and taking those individual needs into account. If we are suspending this policy, those students do not necessarily have accommodations and appropriate objectives nor supports in place to support an additional workload, and they're already struggling. So I would implore the district to include in their guidance to all educators, not just gen ed or special ed, but everyone, to take those into consideration and to have those conversations as teams and adjust accordingly. Thank you.
I just wanted to respond to something that Adam stated. So yes, on the asynchronous days, students have those asynchronous assignments, but students may also receive a homework assignment on a day when they're in person. So if you're in school Monday and Thursday, you may also have a homework assignment that evening so you can practice what you did learn in class. There may be times when that does get blurred because it may also then lead into a project or something that you might be doing on an asynchronous day, but there may also be some very specific standalone homework assignments on those days when students are in school.
Okay, are we ready to vote? John?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Angie?
No.
Kira?
Yes.
Yevon?
Yes.
Oh, did I skip Evelyn? I'm so sorry. Evelyn, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm so tired. Amy? Amy?
Yes.
And me?
Yes.
All right. And did I call on Yevon? Yes, I did? Okay, thank you. Evelyn, I'm so sorry. Okay, so Beth, I think that's yeses, and Angie, who voted against. All right, thank you to the policy subcommittee for all of your hard work on both of those policies. I appreciate it. We all appreciate it. Okay, Adam.
So our budget subcommittee met on Monday, September 21st. I think we've covered most of what the substantive work of the subcommittee on that day. The other thing that we did review was the charge of the subcommittee, which was updated and voted by this committee last year. The subcommittee reviewed the charge and felt that the charge still stood. There was no changes that we felt needed to be made to that. And other than that, we discussed the budget calendar. We discussed our budget guidelines, which we've discussed this evening as well.
Thanks. All right, ALG, which one of you is doing that? You?
The Acton Leadership Group met last week. Minor changes were made to the charter. The ALG will continue to work to consensus. The multi-year ALG model, which is in the school committee packet, currently assumes that Acton will tax to the levy limit in FY22. There will be little increase in state funding, and E&D use will be $1 million. The Acton portion of the ABRSC assessment is assumed to increase 3.9%, while the Minuteman assessment is assumed to increase 31%. The difference between revenues and expenses is an overall deficit of $1.2 million. Through the ALG discussions and adjustments to the budget of the operating entities, the FY22 deficit must be reduced to zero as we go through the year. The town of Acton plans to bond the North Acton Fire Station in March 2021. No significant change in local revenues have occurred. The level of state and federal support for towns and schools for FY22 is highly uncertain, as we've discussed earlier in the meeting. In considering the budget process, ALG agreed the town would be better served by a later town meeting. John Benson will be working to set a new date with the Acton Select Board. The Acton Finance Committee is thinking that town and schools should strive to achieve no tax increase for Acton in FY22, and that in part, this should be achieved through the use of reserves. The FinCom would also like to see a new iteration of the Cost Reduction Committee. Both entities, the town and the school district, thought that the additional burden on personnel would be unwise. And for people who want to see more, minutes and the ALG charter are available on the Town of Acton DocuShare. And since we do have some new people on the committee, if anybody wants to ask about ALG or how it works, I'm happy to answer questions.
Or you can call John and do it offline.
Tessa called me this week, so, you know, people like to call me.
All right. Jenny, would you like to give us a legislative update?
Can you turn your mic on, please?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
This week I spoke with an aide to Lori Trahan and to both Tammy Gouveia and to our new state rep, Dannyâ. You know, basically, this is not going to come as news to anyone. There's still nothing forthcoming from either our state or federal government in terms of any funding or knowledge on, you know, where those numbers might come in. So everything is on hold. In fact, our state legislature has not been in session since the end of either June or July, and they don't go back to formal session until January. So there's only a few things that they might meet on. So we don't know anything about funding. Rep Saina did indicate an interest in assisting in my quest to try to find some funding to bridge the gap between tuition kindergarten to full all-day kindergarten once you know, this pandemic subsides and things get back to normal. So he was actually really interested in looking for some state money to help us with that. So that's good news. And I also wanted to let you know, for the people who aren't aware, that there are a couple of state bills in the legislature, because I also talked to all of them about the need to suspend the MCAS requirement for this year. So there are bills in the state legislature, and there have been letters written to DESE. And I just want to read the one paragraph from this letter. It's from State Rep James Hawkins that I think both our state reps signed on to. And it says 10 days to prepare curriculum and adequate delivery in ways that our educators have little to no experience is beyond a tasking challenge. To add the logistics that accompany high-stakes tests that last up to 8 hours in duration, several days consecutively, numerous times throughout the year makes that task a nearly impossible achievement. Adding the burden of teaching to the tests, as all educators know to be necessary for success, and the stresses that haunt teachers and students alike is unconscionable. The legislature has committed to level funding for the fiscal year. That will give some stability to school districts, but it does not provide for the low-income requirements of the Student Opportunity Act. In the governor's budget, that portion of the Student Opportunity Act, meaning the low-income requirements, was underfunded by $74 million. Yet over $33 million was still dedicated to MCAS. We have seen low-income communities and communities of colors disproportionately devastated by COVID. For this reason alone, it is unprincipled to continue with MCAS serving as nothing but a burdensome tribulation. So there is a lot of action in a lot of opposition, and I think probably most, if not all, districts will support that. So it's an issue that we should all be advocating as to remove that burden from our educators and from our children, frankly, too, this year. So I will continue to keep up with information on the Student Opportunity Act and also the hopeful suspension or moratoria of MCAS. One of the bills in the legislature seeks a 3-year moratorium. So we'll see where that goes.
And I know that there is an MASC resolution. I don't know if that's what you were going to say. Diane, go ahead.
Yeah, so at the delegate assembly, the first resolution that will be debated is a moratorium on MCAS.
Great. Yeah, that was one suggestion that, sorry, if we could, pass that resolution, and many communities do that, that would, up the pressure, hopefully.
And Diane, I don't know if you want to just speak to that very quickly. We won't vote on it tonight, but just on one of our, you want to know what will be coming up on one of our future agenda items so people can start to think about it?
So November is typically the time when we make the pilgrimage to Hyannis. It's a MASC and MASS both have their combined annual conference, and it's extremely well attended, and it's a really incredible couple of days. They're not doing that this year for obvious reasons. MASC is pulling together programming to have a Zoom version, a very abbreviated Zoom version of this event, but their bylaws state that they have to have a delegate assembly, and that's going to bring together representatives from all 351 districts in an annual business meeting, at which time part of the meeting they debate resolutions that have been put forward over the course of the previous year, and the first one is on the moratorium on MCAS, and there are 9 others. These are published on the MASC website, and I have forwarded this information to Tessa. We will need to designate a delegate, and I am currently on the board of MASC, so it can't be me. This delegate will attend a Zoom delegate assembly that is planned for the first Saturday in November, so it's the 7th. It'll be an afternoon business meeting. So I, again, have forwarded all this information to Tessa, and so you can expect to see it show up in a packet. I think we have to fill out the paperwork by, I think, October 30th.
Yeah.
I hope I'm recollecting that correctly. But yeah.
Well, that's what you had said to me. So at one of the next 2 meetings, either the 15th or when we have our workshop on the 29th. So start thinking about it now, because I can tell you right now it won't be me either, because I'm not taking on something else like that. So the other 9 of you can discuss and think amongst yourselves who would like to be that delegate. And Diane will give more information about what would be expected of that delegate when we have it on the agenda. Peter, you want to give a building committee update?
I gave a pretty extensive update last time just about value management process. So the building committee did meet and concluded value management. We had some good news going in that a couple of the potential change orders had come in under what they could have by, I'm going to say, about $500,000, which is a very significant number. So through that and some recommendations to shift some of the design contingency out back into the budget, because the design is nearing the 100% completion stage. We actually were able to really do the value management process without losing anything significant in the building that was educational. So I think overall we were pleased with the process. We feel confident that even though we had to value manage some items, we still preserved all of our energy work. We preserved our water resources. We preserved our educational program. So it was an effective process. We are working on bid documents right now with the contractors to finalize all the bidding processes and subcontractors for the project. Those will be going out over the next month or so, and we should have the guaranteed maximum price for the building sometime in early December from Consigli. Throughout that time period, we'll be seeing foundations started, and I think around December we'll start to actually see steel going up. So that'll be an exciting moment. So one thing we did talk about, you know, with regard to the building project was, you know, traditionally you have kind of a groundbreaking ceremony that's a big deal in the community, and, you know, in the era of COVID, that really proved to be too much of a challenge. But one option that we might want to be thinking about as we move forward, they do something called a topping off ceremony, where you can do a ceremony where it's the last piece of steel that goes onto the building. And traditionally what they'll do is they'll actually put that piece of steel out, they paint it, and then they'll put it out at the existing school for a week or two before it goes up. And then all the kids can come out, they can actually sign the beam. You know, the community can come in and sign the beam, and then the beam gets hoisted and put in place. You never see it again because it's part of the structure of the building, but everyone knows that they got to contribute to it. So that might be something that we can think about as a nice public thing as we go through. But I think we're tentative to try and plan too much because we don't know the course of the pandemic and what's going to be possible. And I've never run a virtual topping off ceremony in my life. So the naming piece. Yeah. Yeah. So the other piece that we want to be thinking about, you know, similar to McCarthytown and Miriam, they're co-located buildings, but the building itself has a name in the Parker Damon building. We have the Douglas Elementary School, we have the Gates Elementary School, but it's probably time to start thinking about the idea of a name for the new building, so that we can, you know, have signage and things like that in place when it opens. So Tessa and I talked about that. School committee probably wants to think about forming a naming subcommittee. There is a policy around naming. You know, I have asked from a staff standpoint to have Marie work on that. You can see her name on multiple plaques already around the district, having done a lot of building projects. She knows the community well. She'd do a great job being a staff liaison to that group. But that is something we want to be thinking about over the course of this year.
So you all can start thinking about if you'd like to be a part of a naming subcommittee, because that would be something that once we have a subcommittee policy in place, we could think about creating that subcommittee. Yes, John?
I just wanted to comment, although this policy is about naming facilities, some of the ideas and philosophy in this are germane to naming things generally. So people who are interested in the colonial name probably should take a look at this as well.
And I'll just say that there's not a joint PTSO update, but Kira and I are working together to put together an initial calendar that we will run by Peter, and we'll get back to those who are involved in that roundtable. All right, number 7, recommendation to accept a very generous donation from Danny's Place Youth Services. Do you want?
So we're just putting that forward. We have a very generous donation of $4,000 from Danny's Place Youth Services that we're seeking approval for.
Move to approve with gratitude.
John?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Evelyn?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Kira?
Yes, with gratitude.
Yevon?
Yes.
Amy?
I sit on the board of Danny's Place, so I'm going to say, abstain.
Great. And me, yes, with gratitude. Thank you very much. Okay, statement of warrants. I can read them.
I even put it on my screen.
You did? Oh, go for it, John. Sorry, you guys never want to do it, so.
I move that the school committee vote to approve payroll warrants as follows. Number P2107 dated 9/24/2020 in the amount of $2,640,363.78. Payroll deduction warrants as follows. Number 21-007 PR dated 9/24/2020 in the amount of $1,074,505.52. Vendor warrants as follows. Number 21-006 dated 9/17/2020 in the amount of $1,286,711.90. Student activity reimbursement warrants as follows. Number 21-006 HS dated 9/17/2020 in the amount of $32,249.41.
Second, with amazement in the lung capacity.
Do we have to do a roll call? Yes, for that. John?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Evelyn?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Kira?
Yes.
Yevon?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Me? Yes. Woohoo. All right. That passes unanimously. As far as the FYI, I am reticent to say this, but public comment is still open for the mascot naming. So if you would like to weigh in with your thoughts, you can send us an email and I will read it. And I'll note that the district calendars have been changed to reflect the change to Indigenous Peoples Day on October 12th. And is there anything else you wanted to add? You already mentioned the signs.
We already got to the big bird signs that we're very thankful for. So.
All right, excellent. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Yes, Angie?
I just want to say happy Mid-Autumn Festival to all the East Asian community. Today is the Mid-Autumn Festival. It's the second largest festival in East Asia.
Thank you, Angie.
Thank you.
John?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Evelyn?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Jenny?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Kira?
Yes.
Yevon?
Yes.
Oops.
Amy?
Yes.
And me. Yes, I will see everyone on October 15th.